All right, so we're going to begin lesson 2, the introduction of Buddhism. Just to briefly recap, last time we went over the Jomon period, the Yayoi period, and the Tomb period, in Japanese known as the Kofun period. So if you don't remember them, you might want to go review the previous material from lesson 1 and just be able to know what each period contributed to Japanese civilization. If you know basically what happened in each period, generally more or less, you should be ready for the new material. So we left off last time in the year 552, which marks the end of the Tomb period and the beginning of the Asuka period in 552 AD. And keep in mind that by the year 552, what eventually became the imperial family was basically gaining power at a very rapid rate. This family claimed descent from the sun goddess, which you might remember in the Shinto religion. The sun goddess is the most divine of the kami and is the top kami in the Shinto pantheon of gods. And so claiming descent from this very important kami basically allowed the imperial family to easily control territory and the people living in that territory. Nobody wants to upset the descendants of the gods. Who knows what calamity would fall upon their family, their crops, etc. And so using this ideological shield, they were able to control vast amounts of territory. Of course, it helped that they also had access to horses and very powerful iron weapons. So they were able to use that to their advantage. However, the imperial family was just one of many powerful families or warlords in Japan. And by the year 552, Japan was not really a nation-state per se. Each region, each area, each village was controlled by numerous powerful clans or families, warlords, and in Japanese the term for that is uji. Okay? And each uji controlled territory of various sizes throughout the country. Of course, the most powerful of the Uji clans was the imperial family, because not only did they have those weapons and the horses, they also claimed descent from the sun goddess. So the emperor and his family were all viewed as being divine gods. No other Uji had this distinction. Only the imperial family. This was their claim to fame. And so, of course, the emperor, even though the imperial family is one of many other clans, because that family was the most powerful one, a lot of the other clans wanted to get in the emperor's favor. Being close to this family means that their position was secure in their own regions. And so the emperor would often appoint the heads of other powerful Uji clans to act as ministers or advisors at court. Okay? And these Uji, they didn't mind because whoever is the advisor has the most influence at the court. So even if you're not the one in power, if you're close to the emperor, then that means you have a lot of influence since you're advising the top guy in the land. Right? So ask yourself, it says ask your partner, but just ask yourself this question. The emperor is appointing heads of families to become high-ranking ministers at the court, at the palace. This is a pretty big deal. And so if you are appointed an advisor to the emperor, you, as the head of your clan, are bringing a lot of power and influence to your clan. So do you think if you become too big for your britches, so to speak, if you become too powerful as the head of an Uji clan, do you think you could eventually threaten the emperor's position and maybe get rid of him and his family and become emperor yourself? This has happened a lot in history. If you look at British history or Chinese history, you see new families gain control, they become more powerful, and then eventually they overthrow the government and become emperors or kings in their own right. Do you think this could happen in Japan? The answer is no. Because there's many Uji, there's many clans, but the only clan that has this claim to fame of being descended from the sun goddess is the imperial family, right? He's not just an emperor, he's also a divine god. He is a kami in the Shinto religion, right? So, as a clan member, as an Uji clan member of any clan, no matter how powerful you are, if you believe in the Shinto religion, how could you ever overthrow the descendant of the sun goddess, who is the most divine kami in your religion? It's not possible at all. And so even if the other Uji clans became very powerful, very rich, controlled lots of territory, none of them tried to depose or threaten the emperor's position as supreme leader of the country. Okay? Because as a member of the Shinto religion, they couldn't do that to a god. Who knows what would befall their families, right? So this is very unique in that the position of the emperor was not really threatened as much in Japan as it was in, say, China or Korea or in European countries or other countries as well. It's very unique about the Japanese royal family. The Asuka period, so we're back to 552 AD, and this period starts with a very interesting turn of events. Buddhism is introduced to Japan from the Korean kingdom of Baekje. Okay, at that time, Korea was actually divided up into three different kingdoms, Shilla, Baekje, and Koguryo. And the king of Baekje, one of these kingdoms, sends the emperor of Japan a statue of the Buddha and also various Buddhist prayers. They're called sutras. So he sends as a present to the emperor of Japan. And when Buddhism arrives to Japan, it's already a very existing old religion. It's over 1,000 years old when it entered Japan. Of course, it was created in India by an Indian prince, the Buddha, but his name was Siddhartha Gautama. And eventually, from India, Buddhism spread to Southeast Asia, going to the countries of Burma, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, and from there, also went to China. From China, it goes to Korea, and then from Korea, it arrives to Japan. So by the time it gets to Japan, Buddhism has been around a long, long time. And Buddhism basically is based on Siddhartha Gautama's teachings. He says there's four noble truths in life. The world is going to have suffering in it, and suffering is basically caused by our human desires. And you can do something about ending this suffering for yourself. All you have to do to end suffering is follow the Eightfold Noble Path. If you follow this path, you will basically reach enlightenment, which is a state of pure bliss and eternal bliss, and you will end your suffering forever. So what Eightfold Path do you have to follow? Well, according to the Buddha, if you have right views, right intention, right speech, right actions, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, if you do these 8 things throughout your life, you will eventually reach enlightenment and end your suffering for good. So this is what is coming into Japan in 552, this new religion. And the specific sect or type of Buddhism that enters Japan is Mahayana Buddhism. And this is practiced in China and Korea as opposed to Theravada Buddhism, which is more conservative and more closely related to the Buddha's teachings that was practiced in India and Southeast Asia. So what makes Mahayana Buddhism different is that in addition to the Buddha, Mahayana Buddhists also believe in other lesser Buddhist deities that are subordinate to the Buddha. So lesser gods or lesser deities. And the place of worship in Buddhism is called a temple, a Buddhist temple, as opposed to a Shinto shrine. So please don't call it a Buddhist shrine or a Shinto temple. It should be Shinto shrine and Buddhist temple. But here's a very important point that I would like to bring up. Japan has its own religion, Shintoism. Okay, so we already have a religion that is very, very deeply rooted, that was created by the Japanese. How do you think they would have reacted to Buddhism? You have a new religion coming in. Is it going to easily just replace Shintoism and people are going to become Buddhists? Or are they going to fight it out? Are they going to have a religious civil war like we've seen in so many other countries? So think about it for a moment. Well, what ends up happening is the Japanese are actually very, very favorable towards Buddhism. They accept it with open arms. This is very unique because whenever new religions enter other countries, it's usually accompanied with bloodshed and persecution. Didn't happen in Japan, okay? There's a couple of reasons for this. For one, anything that comes in from China at that time was accepted with gleefulness because remember, China has been around for thousands of years, for centuries. It has a very advanced civilization. So whatever comes from China is going to be looked at in a very, very favorable light by the Japanese. Okay, starting from wet rice cultivation to bronze to iron to horses, everything new that the Japanese have learned has come from China. So now this is the latest thing that came from China, of course, through Korea, right? And it's come into the country, and now people think, well, if we accept Buddhism, we will also attain this higher level of civilization like our Chinese neighbors, right? And along with Buddhism, you have a lot of art that comes in, a lot of architecture that comes in, right? We didn't really see this much with Shinto. And you see a lot of Buddhist art depicting the Buddha and the lesser deities. Temples are now built because for this new religion, people need a place to worship, to practice this religion. So the Japanese really fall in love with Buddhist art and architecture. And when I say Buddhist art, it really is almost a synonym for Chinese art, because a lot of the art and architecture was influenced by Chinese style architecture and art that was being developed at that time in China. Now, how does Shinto react to this? Is Shinto completely eclipsed or replaced by Buddhism? The answer is no. The two religions actually complemented each other very, very nicely. Okay, and interestingly enough, Japan is one of the only countries where people say that they are both Buddhist and Shinto at the same time. They practice both religions. And we think about all the religious violence around the world. Can you ever think of someone saying, "Oh, I'm Christian and Buddhist," or "I'm Jewish and Muslim"? It will be, a very nice thing if people had that, but that never, there's a lot of religious tension around the world. And at this time, at this early period, the Japanese accepted both religions and said, we're both at the same time. And this was very unique. Why do you think Buddhism and Shintoism were able to coexist and complement each other so nicely? So much that people actually belong to both religions. Well, keep in mind that Shinto and Buddhism are both polytheistic religions, in that in Shinto you believe in many kami, many gods, and in Mahayana Buddhism you have the existence of many divine deities, many divine Buddhas, right? So in the minds of the Japanese who are learning about Buddhism, they say, okay, well in Shintoism we have many kami, in Buddhism we have many deities. So it was very easy for them to accept and sort of mesh the two together. In their minds, they were really the same entities, the same deities that were existing together, that were complementing each other, right? Also, one really big plus that Buddhism had is that it answered questions Shinto did not. Keep in mind that Shintoism does not have a moral code. Buddhism does. It tells you what you need to do to live your life correctly. Remember the Eightfold Noble Path, right intentions, right this, right that. Shintoism didn't have that. Buddhism has a holy book. It answers questions about life after death. People are wondering, what happens when we die? If we're sick, how do we end our suffering? Shintoism doesn't really tell you that. Buddhism does. So this information was really answered by Buddhism, and it really gave the Japanese an answer to questions they might have had about how to live their lives or what to expect after death. So for that reason, Shintoism and Buddhism coexisted very peacefully. And even today, when you go to a Shinto shrine, you will always see a Buddhist temple in its vicinity, or vice versa. They usually exist on the same land. And even today, 84% of the Japanese profess to be both Shinto and Buddhist, and it's not uncommon for birth or marriage to be commemorated with Shinto ceremonies in a shrine, or funerals to be commemorated at to have a Buddhist funeral, which makes sense because remember, Buddhism answers questions about life after death. So it's very, convenient to have that as your comfort when you lose a loved one. It's not uncommon for New Year's to go to the shrine, the Shinto shrine, and then to go attend a service at a Buddhist temple. So it's very common throughout Japanese people's lives to pick and choose elements from both religions. So I don't want to fool you into thinking that everything was peaches and cream with the introduction of Buddhism. Of course, there was some opposition. Certain clans who were very high up in the Shinto bureaucracy, Shinto priests, ritualists, shamans, they were opposed to Buddhism. But one of the very powerful Uji clans, the Soga clan, okay, keep in mind the Soga clan is not the imperial family. The imperial family is sort of above the mold, right, because they're divine. But they have many different clans under them who are helping them out. The Soga clan was one of these clans that was very close to the imperial family. They were usually the family who advised the emperor. They were his right-hand man. And the Soga clan happened to be very, very pro-Buddhist. And so because they had such influence with the emperor, they were able to get the emperor to open his heart up to accepting Buddhism. And so because the imperial family has this very pro-Buddhist element in their ear through the Soga clan, any anti-Buddhist opposition was wiped out using military force by the late 580s, so about 30 years after Buddhism was introduced. And after this small conflict, Shinto and Buddhism were basically able to coexist peacefully with the full support of the imperial family and their advisors, the Soga clan.